Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. Germany start the Euro 2020 campaign in fine fashion with an impressive victory against Holland. How did they do it? Where did Holland go wrong? Don't worry, here at the interviews, we've got you covered. So on this edition of the interviews, we're going to break down how Germany beat Holland. So before we get into today's video, don't forget to give our video a thumbs up if you do enjoy it. The bell below does give you daily notifications regarding our organic, unfiltered soccer/footy analysis. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. In today's video, we're going to break down the first half, see how both sides look to approach the game, and how Germany's front three caused Holland so many issues. Then move to the second half, see what changes Holland made, and then how Germany were able to kill off the game. But first, let's get to the starting lineups. We look at Holland 4-3-3, Babel, Proms, and Memphis Depay up front. In midfield, and with Darun, Wijnaldum, and De Jong. Then we move to Germany, more of a 3-4-1-2. Gnabry and Sane ahead of Goretzka. Out in the wing-back role, Schulz and Carrera. And in midfield, Kimmich and Toni Kroos. So now let's get to the opening half, see how both sides look to approach the game, and how Germany's front three caused Holland so many issues. So when we break down Germany against Holland, the first thing we do have to look at is the way that both sides pressed, because it was a key component to the game. Neither side really dominated possession and created chances from open play. A lot of it stemmed from direct play or the ability to break out of the press, as both sides did press in various ways. We have to look to Germany initially based on the fact that they did change their system here, and it kind of makes sense on paper what they're trying to do. You have the two front players in Gnabry and Sane stepping to the center backs. You have Goretzka playing a bit higher so he could step to De Jong. You have Kimmich and Kroos being able to press onto Wijnaldum and to press onto Darun, who could drop off a bit deeper, and they were looking to get their wing backs forward, because in the earlier stages we did see Ginter, who was able to push forward and join into attacks. We did see Carrera push forward as well to peg back his marker in that regard, and that's how they were kind of going about things, trying to ensure that De Jong couldn't get on the ball. As they dropped off deeper and moved into more of their base shape, they did have the two center forwards in Gnabry and in Sane sit near De Jong to ensure that he couldn't get on the ball from deeper positions, and that was very pivotal to ensure that he wasn't able to dictate the tempo of the game. At times we did see Darun drop off a bit deeper to the left-hand side to try and get onto the ball. Toni Kroos wouldn't push forward in those situations. We would see Sane step forward there, because what would happen is that you had Dumfries pushing back Schulz, so there was space to occupy there, and if he pushed into that space, then you simply have Goretzka possibly step forward if need be. But for the most part, they could have him play that dual role and then have Kroos maintain his position as Memphis Depay looked to drop off a bit deeper into midfield to get on the ball in those situations. But for the most part, they were comfortable in that situation. They had the front three moving into different positions if need be. With that being said, if they had Goretzka step forward, they could push Sane closer to his marker in De Jong to ensure that he wasn't able to get onto the ball. And more so when the ball was shifted out to the left-hand side, you'd see Goretzka step forward to occupy Blind, because Daley Blind does offer the passing presence out of the back that could harm the German backline, especially from long. And they would have Gnabry sit into that space there to ensure that, again, De Jong is unable to get on the ball. That was key for them. That was how they were really trying to nullify Holland's threat from deeper positions, and to ensure that the midfield of Darun, Wijnaldum, and De Jong couldn't dominate the center of the pitch, and that really did stifle them out there. Because what we did see from this front two is that basically they're trying to use the pace of Gnabry and Sane to cause the Holland backline a few issues, and we'll get to that in a minute. And with Goretzka, he could push forward to offer them somewhat of a threat, because like I said, we'll look to instances where you have Toni Kroos on the ball, dropping off deeper to the left-hand side. If Kroos drops off a bit deeper and you have Darun pull out to him, you would often have Gnabry drop off, because what happened here was that when Gnabry dropped off, you wouldn't have Van Dijk step to him, so that would occupy De Jong, and then you would have Goretzka being able to drop off into that space, because again, no one was picking him up with De Jong occupied in that sense. We would often see if Gnabry dropped off deeper in the earlier stages to get on the ball, you would have Goretzka push forward, and most often what they wanted to see was Gnabry drop off and Sane break in forward. Sane could do the same thing, but De Ligt on a few occasions was tracking him, at least if not with his back into him, with his body into his back, you would have him track his movement, but that could also allow Gnabry to push forward. So there was a game plan here that Joachim Löw had instilled, and that was how he was trying to go about things, and that was kind of their way to bypass any sort of press that Holland were trying to instill on them as well. Because when you look at Holland dropping off in the earlier stages, struggling to get into the game, eventually they switched proms with Babel pushing out proms to the right-hand side, but their pressing was pretty simple. Initially, they were sitting off, but as the game wore on, they did push forward. You'd have proms step to Rudiger. You would have Memphis step to Sula, and then again, what would happen initially is when we saw Proms on that left-hand side, he wasn't pushing to Yinter, which is why he was able to push forward. Initially, he was staying with Carrere, who was pushing at an advanced position down that side, but as the game wore on, he stepped forward to Inter to ensure that he couldn't push forward, and that would see Blind step forward to Carrere to ensure that they were struggling to build out the back, and the same thing would apply on goal kicks. They would have the fullbacks pushing out to the wingbacks, they'd have the front three stepping in, and if Kimmich tried to drop off, you'd have Wijnaldum pushing into that space there. But that was kind of how the tempo of the match was going in the opening 45 minutes. So now let's look to Germany's front three, see how they were able to cause Holland's backline a lot of problems with their movement, and why they were able to build a 2-goal lead heading into halftime. So when we look to Germany's chances against Holland in the first half, a lot of it stemmed through their front three and down the left-hand side through Schulz. We look to the opening opportunity, Schulz breaking forward down the left-hand side, not closed by Dumfries, and what does he do? He plays the ball across De Jong for Gnabry, who makes that run across him to get onto it, and then he slides it across De Ligt for Leroy Sane, breaking him behind him, and just like that, the pace of the German attack is utilized, and as he breaks forward into the box, he plays it back for Gnabry, who takes his touch around Blind, and he fires a shot on goal that is pushed away by Silesen. Shortly after that, following Gnabry dispossessing De Jong and allowing Kimmich to break forward before De Jong stepped in, we do see the build-up to Germany's goal, and what happens there is that it stems from Sane pressing De Ligt, as he was often doing from his left-hand side, and what happens is that his clearance does fall to Sula, who nods it into the path of the German midfield. What we end up seeing here is Kimmich playing a pass into Gnabry, who pulls out Van Dijk, and when he pulls out Van Dijk, he drops the ball off to Toni Kroos, who again locates Dumfries a bit too high, and he slides it across him for Schulz, who again picks it up and takes his first touch across him. And who does he locate? Leroy Sane, who runs across De Ligt, who slips into left half space, and he fires a shot in the far corner. There's nothing Silesen could do about it. Just like that, Germany are up 1-0. Later on in the half, what we do see is again that Germany breaching Holland's center backs, and what happens? Kroos from deep plays a ball in between the center backs, and it's Gnabry running in between both of them. Van Dijk recovers, and as Gnabry goes 1v1 with him, he cuts outside, and we see Van Dijk do a great job to block him off. But just like that, one simple out ball, and the Holland backline is breached. We look to another opportunity in that half. It stems from Rudiger, who ends up locating Toni Kroos, dropping off a bit deeper, which pulls out De Roon. And when it pulls out De Roon, what ends up happening here is that he's able to play a pass into Gnabry, who drops off deep into midfield to pick up the ball. De Jong is occupied by Goretzka, who is a bit higher. And what happened there was that when he drops it off to Gnabry, we see De Ligt, who was tracking Sane, retreating back into his position, and Gnabry slides it in between both center backs to ensure that Sane gets onto it, but the pass is a bit short and it allows Van Dijk to get across to clear those lines. But just like that, we're seeing how they're able to break down that Holland backline with swift, direct moves. So now when we get into the second goal, we have to look to the breakdown of how it all stemmed together. It stems from a Rudiger ball into the left channel, but what we end up seeing is that we have Van Dijk on Goretzka, we have De Jong watching Gnabry, and then we have Sane dropping off a bit deeper. De Ligt kind of steps with him, but then kind of somewhat backs off, and Dumfries tracks him into that central space. But what we end up seeing here is Rudiger clipping the ball into that left channel, and when he clips it into there, we end up seeing the run of Gnabry, making it off Van Dijk, and first off De Jong, then off Van Dijk into the left channel in behind De Ligt, and Van Dijk ends up tracking him there, but he's able to run at Van Dijk, cut in on him, and then cut back a bit deeper on Dumfries, who was recovering, to curl a superb effort into the top corner, and just like that, 2-0. But it stems from the movement. Goretzka obviously being occupied, Gnabry being able to make the run off De Jong and Van Dijk into that space because De Ligt was caught watching Sane but not retreating into his position, and just like that, a moment of brilliance from a defensive breakdown leads to the second goal. They had one more opportunity in that opening period where we ended up seeing Proms give away the ball to Kimmich sloppily, and when he picks up the ball, he drops it off to Gnabry, who again is able to turn with no one on him and look at the center backs trying to retreat into their position, because again, you had De Ligt kind of stepping forward, and now you have Sane making the run in between them, and just a simple ball around Van Dijk sees Sane break into that right half space, but Cillessen makes another great save to deny Sane of building on Germany's lead. But just like that, you're seeing the front three being able to use their movement to pull this Holland backline out of position, because when we look to Holland's chances, only two come to mind. They were from direct play and simply out of nothing. Rudiger cleared free kick, ends up falling to De Ligt, who slides it out to Dumfries, and when he slides it out to him, it's Toni Kroos who has to step out to try and close that down, but Dumfries ends up clipping a long ball over Rudiger, and it sees Memphis get across Sula to nod the ball into Proms, running off Rudiger, and now you have a break because it's Ginter who has to come across, and he slides the ball across him to Babel, who makes his first time shot with Sula coming across on goal, but Manuel Neuer pushes it away. Shortly after that, it's Germany in a pretty good position with Schulz, Rudiger, and they have Kimmich, and they have Kroos in that space against Proms and against Dumfries. And what we end up seeing here is they play the passes amongst each other. You have Dumfries eventually playing the ball into De Jong, who comes across Kroos, and that sees Sane get across as well. And with that happening, we had Proms trying to make a run across Schulz, but he eventually drops off, and De Jong plays the ball back to him, and Proms, with his first touch, clips the ball over Ginter, and we end up seeing Babel get across Carrere to fire a shot from point blank range on goal, but again, Manuel Neuer makes the save. But besides that, Holland were really struggling to bypass Germany's pressing, and they couldn't build anything from the back given the way that they were closing them down in those areas, whereas Holland were sluggish. They were struggling to deal with the front three's movement of Goretzka and Gnabry dropping in, and the pace of Sane breaking in behind, along with Schulz breaking on the left-hand side, and Ronald Koeman had a lot of changes to think about going into the second half. So now let's get to that second half, see what changes Koeman made, and how Holland were able to get back into the game before Germany killed it off. So when we break down the second half, we do see Holland make a change. They brought on Bergwijn for Babel. Bergwijn moved to the right, and we saw Proms move back to the left. And we saw a bit more energy from Holland, closing down markers well and neutralizing what Germany were doing well. But they did get into some good positions earlier on in that half when they saw the ball played in behind the wingbacks and in behind the wide center backs. But we did see Sula get across to deny Wijnaldum and deny Memphis, who were being played into those positions through nifty, intricate play. But when we talk about how they were able to stop Germany's main attacking threat in that opening half, which was the front three and Schulz breaking forward, it just stemmed from a bit more work rate and getting tighter to their markers. We looked to some opportunities where, again, just clearing their lines. Germany, they expect Sane to break forward down that left channel, closed down by Dumfries and De Jong, and he's able to get by Dumfries, but Dumfries pulls him back, and that halts the break. So that ensures that he's unable to break forward, and that was key. Shortly after that, you see the ball shifted out to Schulz, and he's closed down, so he clips the ball into midfield for Gnabry breaking off, and when Gnabry drops off into open space ahead of the central line, what we end up seeing, or the halfway line, what we end up seeing is De Roon, and we see De Jong step forward to close him down and win the ball back. Two occasions where we see that happening. Shortly after that, we do see Germany close down from the back. We see Memphis stepping to Sula. We see Bergwijn stepping to Rudiger. And then we also see Kimmich trying to drop off, but De Roon tracks him, breaking backwards to try to get on the ball, and we eventually see the ball played into Sane dropping off. But when Sane drops off this time again, De Ligt doesn't step back in hesitance. He steps forward with him and he wins the ball back. We see Schulz trying to break across Dumfries into the center of the pitch with his running ability, and he's closed down in the central area, and Dumfries wins the ball back. But that was 4 examples in the opening 15 minutes of the second half that showed the intensity that we were seeing from Holland, because they didn't necessarily create enough goal-scoring opportunities or test Manuel Neuer. We looked to their opening goal. It stems from a short corner kick that eventually was cleared, but it came back in, and we saw De Ligt rise above Rudiger and Carrere. And before we get to the second goal, what we do see is they did make some tactical alterations. They did eventually drop off into more of a 5-4-1 without the ball. When they did press, what we did see was Memphis stepping to Sula. We saw Bergwijn stepping to Rudiger, and Proms was dropping off a bit deeper, which kind of helped out with their shape. But at times when he was pressing to Inter, if Memphis couldn't get across, because if Memphis gets across, that leaves a spare man. So they would want to close down with Proms pushing forward from deeper positions. We'd see Blind step out to Carrere. But for the most part, they were dropping off in that 5-4-1, and we would see Proms drop off deeper to deal with Carrere pushing forward. And down the right-hand side, you would have, again, with Schulz pushing forward, Dumfries stepping to him with Blind tucking in a bit more central. However, with the ball, they did cause Germany some problems because Blind was tucking in, and technically that does make sense that helps out Germany in this regard, because what happens is that now they could press with the front 3 and have them close down those wider areas. But what ended up happening was that we often saw De Jong continue to push into this space, and now it becomes a 4v3 and what ends up being a 2v1 out of the back. So we could see either Van Dijk push forward or De Jong, and none of the central midfielders in Kimmich or Kroos looking to step forward, because you had Bergwijn and Memphis who was dropping into that space, not really offering much because there was no runners coming in behind, but they were dropping into that space to show as a passing outlet, and that really helped them out in that regard. Because when we do look to the equalizing goal, it's when Germany are unable to set up to try and close from the front, and it's Blind switching out the ball to Proms, who's able to run at Carrere, and that drags Kimmich across. When it drags Kimmich across, able to split them, and it bypasses Ginter the pass into Memphis, who's often closed down in this space by Ginter and Sula, but he's able to poke the ball into Bergwijn, who's backed off into Rudiger, and he plays it back to Memphis, who fires a low shot past Neuer. Just like that, 2-2, not really testing Neuer, but really making the most of their opportunities when they got them in the box. Shortly after that, we saw Gundogan come in for Goretzka. Now we saw Germany often drop off into more of a 5-4-1 without the ball, with obviously Gundogan sitting in the center, and we had Gnabry and Sane pushing out into the wide center backs when the ball was played out into those positions, and we saw the pressure mounting on them. But still, Holland were doing a great job of stopping Germany from playing through their counterattacking players, but shortly and towards the final 10 minutes of that second half, we saw them finally break free. Ball rolled out to Rudiger. He's closed down by Bergwijn, and Schulz is closed down by Dumfries. And he instantly, what we see is Gnabry check in and then spin in behind De Ligt as the ball is played over him, and he runs at Van Dijk, cuts in, but fires a low shot on goal that is easily saved. Eventually, we see Royce come on for Gnabry, and surprisingly, it's Joachim Löw's substitutes that do make the difference here. We have Kroos playing the pass into Gundogan, who spins away from danger, and he ends up playing a ball in behind De Roon for Royce breaking in, and Royce now looks for the pullback in between De Roon and in between Dumfries, because what happens there is that we end up seeing Schulz making the run across Dumfries and De Ligt to break into the box. The pullback now is played into him, and De Ligt tries to get across, but Schulz fires his shot past the keeper to win the game. But we break down the game as a whole. Germany superb in the first half. Holland unable to deal with their threat, giving the front 3 too much space to drop off and spin in behind. and giving Schulz too much running space to break forward. But in the second half, they changed the system, moved to more of a back three, were tighter when Germany's attackers did drop off, and they were able to get back into the game and score 2 timely goals before Germany were able to kill it off at the death. But let me know what you guys think. Which one of these teams are favorites to win the group, and do you think Germany are back to their best in this system under Joachim Löw? Meet me in the comments below. Don't forget I upload videos every day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.